Committee meeting. Welcome everybody here today. As always, we will start with the consent items. Are there any consent items anyone want to pull? Ms. Burke.
Yes, for information, pull C2, 3, 5, and 8.
C2, 3, 5, and 8. Okay. Ms. Adams, you have anything? I can come back to you.
Yeah,
You want
please.
to look?
Thank you.
That's got mine.
John? 13. C13. I wanted C8 as well, so that's already on the list. Ms. Adams, any others?
C4.
C4. So I've got 2, 3, 5, and 8, 13, and 4. Miss Scipio,
Mine's on.
You got yours? Okay.
That's right.
Can I get a motion then to approve the ballots?
Second.
A motion to second approve the ballots. All in favor, please.
I didn't get
You need a second.
I didn't get the, you get
He
the
didn't
icon.
count.
It's up there. I didn't do it.
Well, y'all did it. All in favor, please vote.
I don't even have mine sitting up there. Okay, aye.
Oh, wait a minute, no, you have to wait.
Oh, that's right.
You don't count.
Yes, thank you.
You
I don't
count,
think
but
it's
just
gonna
not right.
come up.
You need to tell him to
Would
define
you get a
how
good
you don't
seat?
count.
I don't think it'll come up.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those likewise, those are approved. We will start out numerically. We'll start with C2. With the Secretary, please read that one, please.
C2, approval of a project budget ordinance including additional funds for rehabilitation of 108 units of rental housing for families known as Southgate Apartments, located in the East Ward.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I pulled this, but Councilwoman Adams, I will yield to her because there were some things within her word.
Ms. Scipio,
Yeah,
go ahead.
pardon me, I'm in Scipio.
It's all right.
I'm looking at
You can
you
look
and
at
calling
it,
you
all
Adams.
This is I just like to say that this particular apartment complex is one of the nicer ones that have been there for years, that the owners have always maintained it well. I have been in many of those units. I know some of the residents there, and they're very well maintained over the years. And so the owner is now investing money to renovate the entire complex again. And so this is, I can't see any reason why this one shouldn't be forwarded for approval because they are very good citizens to our ward. And I can't say that about all the apartment units in the East Ward.
Whenever, don't call me Miss Adams. Get it together.
Can I get a motion?
I'm gonna make the motion for approval. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. McIntyre, second.
I mean,
Okay.
What
Hang
have
on.
y'all been drinking today?
No, ma'am. Too early.
no.
Nothing. Well, somebody did something. Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, that is approved. We will now go to C3.
C3, information about travel and tourism promotion strategies.
Mr. Chairman, I had
Yeah,
that
go
one
ahead.
pulled. I wanted that one pulled so that those of us who are not familiar with the TDA, whether you're a council person or people listening, to be explained, go in detail, the role that the city plays as well as the role the council plays. And Mr. Rao.
Mr. Rao, would you mind giving us a couple minutes, just summary of this information?
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, members of the City Council. The two items that are noted in this particular item are actually strategic plan action items from the Council's 2017-2021 strategic plan. The Tourism Development Authority does have representation from Mayor Pro Tem Burke. One of the items here basically shares with you a market study that the Tourism Development Authority commissioned back in the fall to get input from visitors to Winston-Salem. It was both an email survey as well as what they call intercept interviews, and some of the findings are noted in the item.
Also about the tax. You know, some people may not know what you mean.
Yes, ma'am. So the county levies a 6% occupancy tax on hotel motel room rentals. The city receives 1/6 of the proceeds from that tax. 1/6 of the proceeds, which is 1/6 of the 6%. 1/6 share of the 6%. And we use that for various travel and tourism related purposes. Some of the large needs include the Benton, providing operating assistance for the Benton, providing also a contribution to the National Black Theater Festival, to Old Salem, the Piedmont Tribe Film Commission, and to various other events that maybe come along during the year where it makes sense for the city to provide some of this type of funding, because we know that the event will bring visitors to Winston-Salem and increase our hotel room usage.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I wanted this also to be brought up, some years ago when we started this, the city, we were getting ready to pass it, but we did not have any minority representation. I'm talking about blacks on there, so we went back and we made the city with ours that we would put a minority on there, and it would say a person who has an interest in art. Now, also, the county has more of a say-so over some things than the city, okay?
Well, the county does provide the administrative support to the Tourism Development Authority, the financial management.
Yes. And I want to say, when I was not as well, I appreciate Mr. Larson going, and when I'm no longer here, my term will be those who are eager for it, then you can have it. But as long as I'm sitting here, I will remain as long as my health. And Mr. Larson, I appreciate the interest that you showed in supporting me with this particular appointment. The reason when Mayor Kavanaugh was the mayor, he looked at not having black representation, and he said we must always make sure that we do. And I'm hoping when the mayor gets his information from whomever may be interested in wanting to sit over on it, he will consult me and let me know what's going on. At one time, I served as chairman. Lynn Hop became the first chairman of this, and I became a chairman of this group. But I'm still here.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Yes, sir.
I said one comment. I also attended this, and this was the last meeting was the year-end presentation of the numbers. And it was fascinating because it talked about how much money we bring in, and that's not on here, is it?
It is not.
The dollar amount is roughly $1 million that we get from it?
Not from the
Just under $1 million. But it also was good because it talked about trends, what things are actually bringing people to town,
Right.
what things people look at after they're already in town. So there's some really good information in it. So it's something I think is important to pay attention to and try to use that to plan for.
And Mr. Chairman, at our last TDA meeting, Mr. Kiger did make mention, I believe he was the one, about the Black Festival, what it brings in, or either Mr. Wise, who's the chairman, who was at one of the personnel committee meetings, what it brings to the city every 2 years that the business people depend on. And the Black Festival plays a major role in giving good support, and a lot of this income comes from the Black Festival. These things need to be recorded and noted, so some people sort of lose their memory. They'll understand clearly what they need to understand. Yes, and Mr. Chairman, if you're ready for a motion,
I got another question here.
Well, not really a question, it's more of a comment.
Yeah.
As a historian, in looking at the report referred to by Councilmember McIntosh, I think it's important for us to, one, I'd like to have this publicly disseminated if possible. I think it's a telling commentary on what our city, how people perceive our city from the outside. And it's interesting that the first two categories they list as the highest categories deal with historic. They view Winston-Salem as historic, and they view us, interestingly enough, as a mix of old and new, which really tells me a very positive way of looking at our town. But a whole variety of things are discussed about how people look at our city, and I think it's an interesting perspective. I think it's a worthwhile study. I'm glad the city was involved in it. Thank you, Councilmember Burke, for your participation in making this happen. I think it's important for citizens to see this, if possible.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything confidential about it. It's just good information about who we are.
Okay. Mr. McIntosh, you had another comment?
One of the interesting trends that was talked about at the meeting, though, was that Gen Xers and millennials are much less likely to visit our museums, much less likely to come here because of a museum. So that's something to be aware of and to plan for and try to augment through other attractions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Chairman, one thing I had to call to the tourism attention, when you do your marketing, it should show diverse. It seems like Mr. McCoy understood that clearly. And then we've had, I've had to make them aware. I believe the last one did not show it, and I questioned why the person you were talking to kept talking about Wake Forest, nothing about Winston-Salem State or Salem College. So this is another thing that they need to understand clearly, because diversity makes this city. And then as far as our history, as you have said, Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Larson, that's the history that people like to come. That's why I vote for these houses to be historical markers, because people like to see historical houses.
This is just for information, so we do not require a motion, but I appreciate everyone's comments. It seemed to be an area of interest. We will now go to C5. If the secretary please read that one. C4, excuse me.
C4, resolution authorizing subordination of a city-county loan for the Enclave 2 at Winston-Salem development located in the North Ward.
You pull that one?
Yeah.
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Just wanted to say again that the Enclave project has been one of our most successful projects, has it not? Ms. Newman, if you would comment a minute on that.
Yes, ma'am. So the Enclave, has always been fully leased. It's one of our more attractive projects or developments in the city. And because of its success is what has led to now the creation of Enclave 2. And so we're looking for these other 96 units to come on board and, again, be another asset to the North Ward as the Enclave has been.
Thank you. And if you've not seen the Enclave 1, please travel to Chatillon or Bethania Road or Rural Tharbor Road to take a look at them. It was in 2010. As a matter of fact, it was the first project that I was involved with developers and the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency and others. It was originally supposed to be homes or something, and when the market went belly up in 2008, 2009, it was just, 2 or 3 units were boarded up, and people were breaking in them and doing all kinds of things. The people in the neighborhood were upset, the people that own nice homes behind it. But it's 25 acres, and the first part of it, we built 68 units, and it's affordable housing, and the second piece is 96 units.
Correct.
For a total of 164 units total that we're building and will have built. Again, I know we talk about affordable housing, but this shows you what we can do. We're only talking really 7 years that it took to pull this off. If we all work together, and this was a public-private partnership with the Valentine Group out of Ohio, North Carolina Housing Finance, low-income tax credits, the county, and the city. So see, it's not just the city of Winston-Salem that's going to be making affordable housing. We got to get everybody to the table to make this happen. But the one thing I want you to walk away with is these units have been leased up from day one and a waiting list, a significant waiting list. And already for Enclave 2, we've got a waiting list. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I'd like to make a motion for its approval.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Oh, is this going to work today?
It worked. You might want to be. See?
Okay, now, there we go. All in favor, please vote. Thank you. That is approved. We will now go to C5. If the Secretary, please read that one.
C5, resolution accepting a North Carolina drinking water state revolving fund loan for the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant Modernization Project.
Ms. Burke, I had your name with this one.
Yes, at the last meeting, there was a discussion. Is there anything we need to know about this, Mr. City Manager?
Who would like to comment? Which staff member would like to?
I'll let Mr. Duquesne
David,
comment
go
about
ahead.
it.
I see.
Good afternoon, Chairman
Won't you
Clark.
This is somewhat of an unusual item.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council.
Good afternoon.
So this item, the $20 million is part of the state revolving funds for drinking water. And those are set up, they're essentially federal funds that are administered by the states at low or no interest for infrastructure projects. They're kind of born out of the ARRA funds after the housing market crash. So In order for the Utility Commission to do these things, they need approval of the City Council. So back in 2017, they brought forth an item for your approval to apply for this. And the state agreed that the project at Nielsen, which is a modernization of the plant. So the Nielsen water treatment plant is a 48 million gallon a day water treatment plant. It's essentially two plants in one spot. The original plant was built back in sort of the 1960s, 24 million gallons a day. And then in the 80s, it was expanded by 24 million gallons a day for a total of 48. Obviously, we've done a good job of maintaining and band-aiding the part that was brought up in the 60s. This project will modernize the plant in bringing everything up to current standards and processes, and also making sure that all of the equipment and all those sorts of things are all consistent with each other. So if you have a pump made by Smith on one side, the pump is made by Smith on the other side, making maintenance a lot easier and more cost-effective.
Thank you. Ms. Saunders, I gather this is a very, very good interest rate for us. Thank you. Ms. Burke?
You want a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
I move for approval.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. There we go. Everybody please vote. That is approved. We will now go to, thank everybody for that one. We will now go to C8.
C8, resolution awarding contract with MGT of America Consulting LLC for the City of Winston-Salem disparity study.
Okay. Ms. Burke, you had this one?
Yeah, who will address this one?
Ms. Hinton will.
Would you like to give us an introduction of what this is?
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, and members of the committee. What you have in front of you is the MGT proposal to conduct our disparity study. Back in March of 2018 is when we originally brought the solicitation to advertise for proposals. And the purpose of the disparity study is it's going to analyze the inequality of any MWBE participation throughout our organization. They will take data, compile it to quantify the size of our market area, availability for construction services, goods and services, and professional services. And so what will happen at the end of this, after the data collection period, we'll have a large public engagement session. There will be reports that will be provided on a monthly basis. And then at the end, we will have recommendations and findings. And the intent of those recommendations and findings is to identify areas of growth and opportunity for our MWBE program, to identify additional opportunities for MWBE firms. The consultant here that we're suggesting is MGT of America. We had 5 proposals, and we had an evaluation panel, which included 3 members of our MWBE advisory committee. There were several areas that were considered, and if the prices are there, as well as the workforce demographics for MGT of America.
I had a couple
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Burke, go right ahead.
What made, Ms. Hinton, why did we select this company? How did they stand out? And then also, how will you be engaging the public to participate?
Sure. So all of the proposers were scored on their commitment to MWBE firms, the location of their company, their proposed plan or methodology, their qualifications and experience, their experience with other municipalities, and price. For MGT of America, they scored particularly high in the areas of the proposed plan of action and the relevant consultant organization. MGT has completed disparity studies for several cities throughout North Carolina, including the city of Charlotte, the city of Greensboro, the city of Asheville, and the city of Raleigh.
What about engagement?
And their public engagement, so they said they will have 65 in-depth interviews. So they're going to look at minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, non-MWBE businesses, and what they put in their proposal is public sessions throughout the community, coming to city council, council meetings, and working with staff to identify the best areas to engage the public. They will also have a website which will give information on the timeline of events to make sure that the public knows what's going on, when it's happening, and they will work closely with staff to make sure that we have that throughout our website.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask another question. when you look at this company, when you look at their hiring within, today I talked with a company we getting ready to use, and they don't even have any diversity, and diversity happens to be one of the things that we'll be looking at, and they do not have diversity. How is their diversity?
For MGT of America, they said they have 50% female, 50% male, 3 African Americans, 1 Hispanic, and 6 Caucasian individuals that work for the actual organization. They also agreed to subcontract exceeding that 10% minimum with MWBE firms as well.
When we, thank you, city manager, when we bring in companies, that ought to be one of the first things we look at. If they're not sensitive about how they hire, and then they have nerve enough to talk about diversity and don't even have diversity like I think they should have. When we say 50, say that again, you said something about 50.
It was 50% females and 50% males that work for the organization.
Okay, now the 50% females that they have, do you know whether they are?
I do not, but I can get the information for you if you'd like.
Next meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Bennett.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Larson?
Could you elaborate on the business location? I noticed that several of the companies scored 0 on business location, which was a deciding factor in the difference between MGT and Griffin and Strong Company.
Sure. So what we did for every RFP and every RFQ throughout the city is require that we give the most point allocation to firms located in Winston-Salem. The next amount of points will go to firms within North Carolina, and the least amount of points are allocated to those firms outside of North Carolina. So in the case of this proposal, MGT, their location did not give them the highest amount of points. However, there were other qualifying criteria that helped them to score higher than the other proposers.
Yeah, the price, for example. Significantly different. And so you think that the fact that this is a North Carolina firm, this isn't a Winston-Salem firm?
No, it's not. Charlotte.
MGT is not a Winston-Salem firm. So, but you still gave them a score of 100, right? No, 960, excuse me, on business location. So they're out of town.
They're in the state.
In state.
But they're in state.
Correct.
You get 3 for that. Look at you, on your chart on the left side.
I see the point schedule. Yeah, I see the point schedule. I'm just not sure that it makes that much difference in a consulting firm like this, whether they're getting on a car or a plane. I don't really understand. It's a 60-point swing on a spread that's 30 points.
Okay.
First of all, then again, I want to thank the staff for moving to get this done. We've been in discussion about this study for a while now, at least probably the past 8 of my 10 years on this council. There were those in us that thought we didn't need this, but in the world we live in, like I tell people, you would think that there is equality across the board, and it's just not. And if you don't have someone that can put the mirror in front of you and do the hard truth tale that we're not who we think we are, despite our studies on tourism and everything else, the fact that there is a perception of disparity amongst our citizens and others about people of color and women being given contracts to do business with the city and how we do it, the fact that there is economic development inequality, and the fact that we don't include the way we should. And one of the things that I found very stalking to me was we didn't think we needed it, but yet when you got Charlotte, Durham, Raleigh, Greensboro, Wilmington, and other cities that have done it because they realize they need to do it, it's like it speaks volumes to your brand. To, again, going back to those people that want to come and do business in your town, people that want to come live in your town. And we talk a good talk, y'all, about how we just so diverse and inclusion, but the real truth is we're not. And we need help. And as soon as we can open up to each other and understand that we all want the best for our city and our citizens and those people that are trying to create those economic bases of small businesses and jobs and whatever, the better we'll be. BB&T left the house. We now, like I told people, small businesses carry the economy of this country. and of these small towns and municipalities. And so, Mr. Chair, you know, I'm going to support this 100% because I know some of us got tired of me talking about this one, but I'm glad we got it done.
Any other questions before we do the motion? Okay, can I get a motion on this?
You can
Second. Let's wait, it'll come up here just a second.
And thanks for that report, Mr.
You're very welcome.
We have 3 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining. Thank y'all very much. The next one is C13.
C13, resolution awarding purchase order for Transaid buses in the amount of $773,442.
Mr. Larson, I think you
Yeah, I
answered
really
this
just
one.
have a couple of questions. I'm sorry, Dan Bessie, who's chairman of the Public Works Committee, and Mr. Busman isn't here, but my perception was that Transaid ridership was actually decreasing, not increasing, which this report seemed to indicate that it was. And then the other question that I sort of have was how many Transaid vehicle buses do we currently have? How many actually operational? I understand 40 is a number that's been tossed around. 36 the state wants us to have. We're going to get 35 with this purchase. What are we actually dealing with? How many do we have? How many are operational? How many will we have if we buy this 5 that are operational? And if we have surplus, where do those go?
Okay.
Is that simple enough?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Councilmember Larson, I may have to get some of those answers for you at a later date. As I recall, as far as the ridership had, for Transaid had been increasing exponentially. And one of the reasons we thought that was happening was because of the fares that we had and the way we were operating before. And so council was very generous in allowing us to increase the rate for Transaid, and we have seen a decrease. However, our agent community does continue to increase, and they do rely on our Transaid services for those trips that they have. What we've found is that the decrease in trips has been because of the kind of trips that the riders choose to use rather than the number of passengers that we're serving. So we're still serving about the same amount of passengers, but a lot of those trips that would be considered maybe not social, but those extra trips that they would take, they're not taking as many of them because of the increase in fares. The buses that we're purchasing now, they are replacements. They're not adding to the fleet. But exactly how many we have in the fleet, a bunch of numbers are going in my head, and I'm not sure, so I'd have to get that number to you for sure. Yes, sir.
And I was going to comment, we didn't raise the price. It was free for a while, a long time, and it was exponential. And it's my contention if something's free, the demand is infinite.
Yes.
More, I mean, you could call and have a bus pick you up, and I'm old enough it would pick me up for free. If it would come every 2 minutes, I
call
would
every
need a
day.
car. On the other hand, the ridership on Winston in 2018 was the lowest in 22 years, and I have that data. And it's only 22 years because I didn't go back any further than that. So that has been dropping off. But anyway, if you could get us that information, number of
Yes,
us,
sir.
we appreciate it. The other question? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to comment on Transaid service. We had an issue with the dialysis center, and so we connected the general manager with the persons who needed the service. And we had a wonderful meeting the first quarter. They just changed how they started dealing with their, not just the customers, but the dialysis centers, social workers. And it's been a marvelous kind of resolution. So they love the Transaid. People were negative about some of the service, but just getting people together to talk about what you need, what's not being communicated, has made a world of difference. And so the passengers are very pleased with the service now. And the social workers at the different dialysis centers, because it was 4 of them, have been very pleased with the service that Worcester is now given through Transaid. So it is a valuable service to people who need it. And
it's not.
yeah, but they also have talked about the bumpiness of the vehicles,
that need to be replaced.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say that's very interesting hearing from Councilwoman. We've been trying to get them to do just what you say now is successful.
Yeah.
Because they didn't come together. There were patients with the same time. They were not
Yeah, it
coordinating
was
back.
terrible.
So I commend you for moving us forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? If not, I'll take a motion on this.
I move for approval, Mr.
Burke
Chairman.
moves for approval. Is there a second?
Second?
Second. We have a motion and a second on C13. If you'll please vote when it comes up. There we go. Nope. Almost. There we go. Okay. Thank y'all very much. That concludes the consent agenda. We will now go to the general agenda. There are 5 items on here. We will start with G1.
G1, resolution ratifying action taken on November 15th, 2018 regarding SG Atkins Community Development Corporation's repayment of the construction loan for 3248 Ridgeback Drive and making a grant to the development project for the repayment shortage of the construction loan.
If y'all remember last meeting, we discussed this more as an informational in 2 areas. One specific to this particular residence or house about the fact that it sold for less than the note. We were going to forgive it or do some type of arrangement. And that's what's in G1. G2 is more of a general policy that the board will adopt. And the concerns of the last meeting was we wanted some type of cap put on that. And I think when we get to G2, you will we'll see that. So anyway, this is G1. Ms. Newman, if you'll just give us a brief reminder of what this is.
Yes, sir. And I might also ask if the chair wouldn't mind, and good afternoon, Chair, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, and the rest of the council members. If we could possibly do G2 first, because then it could help support an additional request with G1.
I have no trouble. Let's go to G2. Secretary, please read that one.
G2, resolution authorizing the city manager or his designee to accept less than full repayment of construction loans not to exceed $30,000 per home constructed for the remaining properties eligible for home funds in the Ridgewood Place subdivision in the East End revitalization area.
Ms. Newman, do you want to comment on
Yes.
this one?
So this was the second part of that original information item that came to you last month, where we had both combined the ratification as well as the subsidy policy. At the time that we met in January, we had some discussion about what would be an appropriate maximum or cap on the subsidy, and staff went back, did some research. Based on our understanding of increasing construction prices, we're coming back and suggesting that we should have a maximum cap of $30,000, which would allow any shortage to include the developer being able to earn both a developer fee as well as make sure that the brokerage costs are covered. And that brokerage fee and that developer fee are capped at 5% of construction cost.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions here? Okay. Mr. McIntosh?
Is this policy citywide, or is this just pertaining to the current stuff that we're dealing with right now?
This policy only applies to the Ridgewood subdivision and the East End revitalization area.
Because we're going to be short 8,000 houses, and we spent 30 grand a house.
Yes,
That's real
sir.
money. Big job. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Larson?
Yeah, that was basically my question. I think if we're going to do this, it needs to be very clear that it's limited in the scope of geographical area that it's covering.
Yes, sir.
And I also would appreciate some report as to if we're tapping into these funds, which I assume are the home funds of some sort.
That is correct.
That if we're going to be tapping into those on a regular basis, I think it would be useful to have staff report to us at least when those monies are being drawn down, so we can monitor the projects.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable with it just being an open-ended
Yes, sir.
project.
Yeah, it is. And it was practically 8 or 9 homes?
So on the East End development, it's a maximum of 10 homes. In Ridgewood, however, there are still 52 lots in Ridgewood. Some would be home, some would be covered by bond funds, if I'm correct. It's either bond or housing finance. I believe it's bond.
But it's limited to just those 2. And we don't have, obviously do not have 52 homes under construction.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll
Second.
sec-
Mr. McIntosh, second.
This
Yeah,
is
go
an
ahead.
indirect question. Habitat.
Yes,
Do
ma'am.
they have money we still have for them that they have not spent?
No, ma'am. The only thing that was just approved as a consent item was the $65,000 for the house, the duplex that was to be remodeled, that was then demolished. So that was approved to go towards the construction of a new home. But otherwise, we have no other outstanding obligations to Habitat that have not been met.
Yeah, I meant to ask if it's a consent, and just when you brought that up. So
Mhm.
there's no money set aside that we've been giving to them, and they have not spent it yet.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No, ma'am. We have our usual agreement with them that comes through our community agency allocation process. And so as those houses come online, they get the subsidy that we've agreed to for that, but I'm not aware of any other funds.
Explain that then, the subsidies that we've agreed to.
So under the community agency allocation process, they make application like a lot of the other community organizations that ask for support, city support, and their application for funding as assistance to help lower the cost of the first mortgage for the home buyer. Usually it caps at $14,800. Those are approved so many a year based on their application. And so they're in a current application period where, as they're bringing the houses online, we pay whatever that 14.8 or up to that 14.8. And those are the only other commitments we have with them right now.
So if somebody will listen to this had been misinformed, they would be well informed now. There is no money. They only get it as they need it. It's not somewhere sitting aside saying this is their money.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If everybody please vote. And that is approved. Thank you. We will now go back to G1.
Yes, sir.
I'll give you the floor again.
Thank you. So G1 was to ratify the action that council took in November to actually provide a grant to the project because the house sold for less than the construction loan. This house sold for, and I needed to clarify a mistake that I made on the record. I mentioned 109, but that's in the East End. This particular house was in Ridgewood. It sold for $120,000. The overall construction costs were $125,000, and that amount did not include the developer fee and such. So when you all approved us being able to close on that loan, we knew that there was going to be a shortfall of $11,300. So we're asking you to ratify now that action that you took in November, and this will also now, with the new policy you adopted under G2, enable us to go back and also pay the developer fee, because initially when we brought this to you, it did not include the developer fee. And so now the developer fee will be 5% of the construction cost.
Okay, all right. Mr. McIntosh.
I still had my question answered about what the original contract price was on that house before the appraisal came in.
Right. The original contract price was $120,000.
And that's what the appraisal was as well.
No, the appraisal actually came in at $125 post-contract. So the initial contract was taken for $120,000, and then subsequent to having received the contract for sale, an appraisal was done, I guess, in anticipation of getting the mortgage, and it actually appraised at $125.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on G1. If everybody please vote. Thank you. That is approved. We have done G1 and G2. We will now go to G3.
G3, resolution authorizing the adoption of procedures to recommend funds to be recaptured and reallocated to meet the expenditure time requirements for CDBG and home funds.
If everybody again can remember from the last meeting, we had an issue with some CBG or home funds, whatever it was, that had expired, and we had to, or could not draw them down because they had expired, and we have asked the city manager to come up with a policy to prevent this from happening. And I believe what we're handing out is the policy.
Yes, sir. So the policy was shared in the previous meeting, and at the Community Development General Government Committee, we were asked to provide more specificity to the policy. And so what you see in the version that has been handed to you that's highlighted are some additional specifications that can address making sure that we are timely tracking and engaging with the grantees so that they'll understand what is expected of them and what can happen if they are not spending the funds as per the contract and the timeline that's agreed upon. And so what was in your original packet did not show that additional highlighted information, so that's why I'm handing it out to you in that fashion, so that you can see the difference between what was originally proposed and what we've gone back and edited.
And this is on the agenda for tomorrow for general government as well?
It is.
Okay. All righty. Any questions, comments? Could I get a motion on this, please?
Move for approval.
Motion,
I'll second it.
we have a motion and a second.
And
Ms. Adams?
I have a comment that may be more relevant to 2 and 1.
Okay.
But as we go forward, the city manager and staff, like we discussed, we don't do housing very well. That's not what our forte is. We get the money, but we're not developers. And right now, with us trying to make a push on affordable housing and get some other agencies and partners with us, we are going to contract or outsource or however you want to call it. We got to go get an expert so that we get the best bang for our money for our citizens and the people that are affected by it. And I just want us to understand that that's coming. And I know we got a tough budget year or two, but if we're going after monies for affordable housing for our community, we now got to put an expert in place, and other cities do it, we need to do it. And that's my comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Burke?
I know we've talked about Mr. Kelly a few minutes ago, Mr. Kelly King.
Mm-hmm.
One thing he said in his speech, and I discussed it with the city manager, we do not deliver service as quick as we should. We do not have people who are as accountable, following up with Councilwoman as they need to be. No business would operate like we are operating some of these departments until we shape up and step up and do what we ought to do. It's not business as usual. These are taxpayers' dollars. I was in conversation with Ms. Logan Ford, and I talked about that loan committee taking so long, and then us having a an attorney to do some of the things. And I was pleased by her coming in new that she has something called neighborly, that you don't have to go through that process you once had to go through. I said to the city manager, again, more than one time, when you bring new people in, let them bring new ideas. And don't let folks who've been around get in the way, and with that being one of our most important committees, community development and housing, because we're in the big business, and we're going to have to act like big business people. Yeah. And anything you brought new to it, I want you to know.
Yes, ma'am.
I want y'all to observe how many women are letting you know how we need to shape this city.
Running it.
Okay.
Running.
Yeah.
Thank you. Everybody, please vote, please. That is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was G3. We will now go to G4.
G4, resolution authorizing modification and execution of a lease for surplus space in the Union Station building at 300 South Martin Luther King Jr. Drive under the provisions of NCGS 160A-272, located in the East Ward.
Mr. Borland, it's been a while since we've discussed this. Would you mind re-educating us on the project? Thank you.
Certainly, Sheriff Clark. On May the 21st, 2018, the City Council authorized a lease with Elizabeth Pizza for 3,000 square feet in the Union Station building for Suite 210. Additional negotiations regarding the size of the various suites necessitated Elizabeth Pizza to require the lease of an additional space in Suite 218, containing an additional 992 square feet, for a total of 3,914 square feet. Due to the historical nature of the building, there is a super adequate men's and women's lounge restroom space, totaling 374 square feet. So there's a proposal to you today to lease to Elizabeth's Pizza 3,540 square feet in 2 suites. And over a period of the first 5-year initial rental period and the 2 options, that would total an additional $103,275 in lease payments. And in addition to that, Elizabeth is prepared to offer the city an additional rental payment of 3% of the annual net sales over $1 million annually. Now, in the meeting last month, there were several questions that were asked, and a memo has been prepared to answer those questions, which you should have, and I'm prepared to go into that and answer any questions, or we could go over that item by item if you like. But also Lou Baldwin, the agent for Elizabeth's Pizza, is present today, and he can answer any questions that you have may desire of him. So we can go to that memo if you like, or we can just answer questions.
Okay, I have a few, but I'll go around the table first. Any questions? Before we get to you, because you might have a lot, can we get the map up of the building, the one that's got the 3 colors on it?
Just the upper floor, I can get that.
Pink, salmon, and blue.
Mm-hmm.
Just hold tight. That's fine. Okay. My question, they're looking to rent the pink and the salmon. Is that correct?
That's correct. Originally, just the pink part was included, which was 3,000 square feet, but they're going to need the additional space too.
Okay. The blue space is just blue because it's another available space.
That's correct.
Okay. Excluding the blue on the other side where you see the benches and things, is any of that leasable?
That's the common area, which the question was asked last month, and that could be available for lease to private parties or community groups if the decision is made to do that.
But not a permanent lease?
No, there's not a
So other than the blue space, nothing else is leasable really
on the top floor, yes.
Okay. The restaurant, what door will they use as their entrance and exit?
Their entry would be, as you're looking at that, it would be the right or the east side on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive.
Okay. And the main doors which face north,
that'd be towards the top or the north.
Are they normally open during day hours or what happens there?
Well, that leads into the common area.
Yeah.
And the particulars, of course, we don't have a tenant, has not been worked out, but that would provide access to the common area there.
But is it normally open?
It could be open during the day, or
but it's not currently. Well, I don't know if they're finished yet either. Okay. Okay, thank you. I will say I did read through it, and I do like the way the commission is being done now by segments of the lease as they are renewed. So that was my big concern. Now, Mrs. Scipio, this is in your ward. You have something first?
Yeah, we went out and did a site visit today, and it made more sense to me than just seeing it on paper. The main restaurant space is not big enough to support that many bathrooms. I mean, those bathrooms are built out of brick and whatever to support a much larger space. But also within that footprint of the pink, the larger space, it would be really difficult to put a commercial kitchen in there. It's almost completely surrounded by windows. Now, this other space is going to be difficult as well, but it would be really tough, I think, to adequately build out a commercial kitchen in that space to service that restaurant. So, like I said, a walkthrough made it much more apparent to me that this made sense.
And that was the purpose of coming back for the additional space for the kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay. Scipio, this is your ward. We would appreciate your input.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate the city for restoring this wonderful building. When it's open and people can go, they're going to be stepping back into a place that many of them never, ever thought existed. So it's a beautiful renovation. In the early development, Mr. Clark, the side where you have the benches over there was thought of as a museum-like space. This is a historic building, which I believe 50% must be transportation related. Mm-hmm. And so that upper level, that half, with some type of museum kinds of artifacts, panels or stuff, would allow that to be up towards that 50%. Of course, the lowest level is where the Department of Transportation will be. Mm-hmm.
So we also have a second floor that is leasable space. One of the things that's important to me is that though this is a city facility, we must make some money. We got to have some income on this building. So we do need to have some tenants coming in to pay for it. My concern for the restaurant was that we walked through it today and it had only one entrance to it, which would be from outside. And my concern was if I'm visiting there, I want to go to the restaurant. So where is the inside access? And so we were talking about that today with Mr. Baldwin. And so we originally, I guess, when doing the renovations, when they first looked at it, one section did not have a cabinet there, and so you could walk through from the main lobby through the other space. But now they built it out according to where it should be. It's a counter, so that access is not there. So that is a concern, and we have to. Well, the tenant's going to have to work on. We talked about some options with that. So it is a beautiful space, and from my understanding, we've already gotten a temporary lease with it, with this tenant, correct?
No, I think this is the lease.
This is it? There was not, okay, been executed. So I think we need to have Mr. Baldwin tell us from what he saw today, how he thinks he'd like to proceed on behalf of the tenant.
Mr. Baldwin, would you please step forward? If you'll give your name and address for the record, please.
Lou Baldwin, 2217 Westover Drive.
If you just give us just a few comments on the tenant and maybe a tentative timetable, a few things like that.
Sure. Elizabeth Pizza is the tenant. Every Elizabeth's Pizza that you see in the Triad is not under the same ownership group. They're kind of related entities, but different corporations and individuals running them. This would be the Elizabeth's Pizza that's run by Frank Papanti on University Parkway across from the Coliseum.
Yep.
So this would be a second location for him. He's excited about it. I was excited because I was helping Mr. Papante look for other locations when I learned about Union Station coming available and looking for a good restaurant about close to 2 years ago. And there were a lot of things that I think are a great fit. Number one, he's used to serving university atmospheres and working with a lot of college students and with the neighborhood and with sporting events across the street and various things like that, that this is another neighborhood that offers all of those things. And I think he runs a quality restaurant. It's not just pizza. It's got a great menu, some opportunities for salads and pasta and other healthy things that can be eaten there. So I think personally, I think it's a good fit, and we're excited about coming there.
Timeline, how long would it take him to update it and get open?
Well, the delivery space is getting closer and closer to something here. I think it would depend on the cooperation with the city on the final aspects of converting that back suite into kitchen space. But my guess would be that you'd be at 90 to 120 days to opening date, maybe, hopefully.
Sometime in the summer.
Hopefully not. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have a little bit of concern about the things that when Councilwoman Scipio and McIntosh and I went out there today, because we did have a little different impression about the access from the common area into the restaurant prior to some of the historic pieces being put back into place that block that access. My thought is that we could approve this change to the lease that we have today if y'all so wish, and then we could work out some ingress egress issues maybe that would give us better access to the inside of the space, whether that's through, depending on what y'all do with the blue area. We'd be very willing to cooperate with certain uses in the blue area and had conversations about that with the assistant city manager and with Mr. Because if it was a coffee shop or something like that, my client would be very willing to have them share some seating area during the morning hours, access each other's restaurants through each other and cooperate and that type of thing. So that's one idea that could work there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Baldwin?
Comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, as to Councilmember Scipio's comments about what this means to the folk in the community. You know, I know when we first heard that Elizabeth wanted the space, I do know that some people were concerned. All they could think about was all they could give us is pizza. Well, I go to Elizabeth, and I mean, you can get anything there from fried chicken to pasta to salads to you name it, lasagna and everything else you can. The food is very good. The service is great. But I just wanted, when this blue space, I think we have to keep in mind, we have got to keep something open for some other people to be able to, as long as there's some areas, council member, that other small kiosk type businesses and others can get in here, I have no issue with this. But I believe that if we don't accomplish that as we move forward with Elizabeth, we're going to have a big headache from the folks in the community because they're not going to like it. And you know how folks can boycott and they can do what they want to get their point across. We want Elizabeth to be welcoming to the community, but if we're not allowing, and the first thing we said when we said we were going to do this is allow for the people in the community, small businesses and others, to have an opportunity to come in here. Young people, startup, coffee shop, makerspace, something, Wi-Fi, where they come and they gather, which means other people come. So as long as we can work towards that, I'm okay with it.
Right now, the blue space is available, and we would welcome anyone who has an interest to please let us know. Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I want to applaud staff and the city for supporting the preservation of our last train station, and certainly think it's an important icon for the whole community, and congratulations to Councilmember Scipio for pushing this project forward. I do have, as an old history major, though, I'm just trying to understand the math a little bit, so bear with me, all right? Somebody can explain this to me. As I understand it, the first year we get $12,000 in rent back. Second year, we get $12,000 in rent back. Third year, we get $24,000 in rent back. Fourth year, we get 36. Fifth year, we get 36. Is that, somebody can tell me that's what's on the report, as I understand it?
Yes.
And this is as it stands without the addition. And then I'm told.
No. It's in the paper. It's in your thing here.
Yeah, it's in the thing. This is the first session without the additional property that's being added in this motion. I mean, I can. If you want to go look at the other one, it's 14-1-6, 14-1-6, 14-1,
yeah.
30, 20, 28, and then 42-480. What I don't understand is then there's a line that says, if you look at those numbers, it says that annually we're getting $40,500 out of that. How do we get $40,500 out annually when we're only earning 12, 12, 24, 36, and 36? Can somebody explain the math to me on this?
Where's the 40,000 written?
It's on page 1. If you look at the page 1 of the proposal. Where I'm looking at, I don't know which document.
On page 2 of the car.
Well, page 1 on, let's see, must be the
first.
Well, no.
The CARF or the red?
CARF, I think. It's the CARF, second paragraph, where it outlines the revenues generated.
At the
I
bottom.
think the best place to look is on the second page, where you have a summary side by side of what was already approved and what we're asking for.
Which file, which document is that in?
You're talking about the next year, 6 through 10.
Right.
Well, I know the section. Well, yeah, and it changes again on the second 5-year series.
Yeah, then it goes up.
Right, but I'm trying to understand where the total comes from for the first 5 years. It's supposed to be $40,000 a year that we're generating, is what the document says, but I don't see that in the math.
That $40,500 is what the yearly rent would be in years 6 through 10.
Each of those years.
Each of those years. That's the first 5-year option. The original leases, as you say, it's 12,000. No, whatever the numbers are.
So for year 6,
Rent
so that
starts
means
off very
so the first time it's averaging closer to 30,000 or whatever it is, 28. But you're saying the 40,000 applies to the subsequent lease. So year 1 through 5 is 12, 12, 24, 36, and 36 basically.
Yeah.
Plus now we're bumping that up to 14, 14, 28.
Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
Right.
One up a little bit, yeah.
Am I understanding this correctly now? So our revenues would be what, 47,795 now,
Right.
47,000 per year?
That would be each of the years in the second 5-year option. And then in each of the years in the third 5-year option would be 59,295.
Right.
Right.
So then over a period of 15 years, the increase would be 103,275 over what the previously approved
Right.
resolution would be.
Right. So we are charging rent. Thank you.
May I ask?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how many businesses will we be able to put there at that station? Other than Elizabeth, and maybe someone say the other part. Actually, how many businesses?
Well, the plan shows, if we take this for the kitchen, that would be two designated spaces on the upper level. And then on the mid-level, there are additional spaces. I'll put that map up.
Okay, because like we brought up earlier, if people are visiting their families, the families would like to go somewhere and have a nice dinner rather than going across town to get a nice dinner. And I would hope that that's what America's about, competition. So we just have to make sure nobody's going to take over with just one business. All right.
Second floor is completely available.
All right.
I would like, at some later date, if you could give me, when it's all done, how much we total spent on Union Station. That includes when we bought Mr. Davis out, we relocated him, and I know we had one contract. We had a couple of contracts. One was the demolition contract, and then the rehab contract. Just all together, because we're about finished now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We spent a lot of money.
Mr. Davis bought that property for less than $50,000, I think,
Yeah.
and he got a whole lot for it. And Winston, I'm not going to rehash this. I'm not going to get it started.
Okay.
Question.
Can we get
Question.
Mr.
Are
Larson?
there any additional expenses to this change in lease as far as upgrades? And second question is, are we still under budget on this project? Yes, we're under budget, and do we know if there are any additional expenses to be incurred by this lease change?
Well, the additional expenses are pretty much itemized there in Roman numeral 1.
Kitchen improvements.
$350,000.
Yeah, right. But that's still well within the budget that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Bessie, welcome. Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Move for approval.
We have a motion to approve the contract for
Second.
the Elizabeth Pizza. We have a second. Everybody just hold tight. Are we done? Oh, it's already come and gone. All right. It's approved. Missed it.
Living in the future.
All right. G5.
G5, fiscal year 2019-2020, early budget forecast information.
Miss Tony, I told you only want good news today. You got the floor.
Look, we left you 30 minutes almost.
Yeah, you got 30 minutes.
Uh-oh, not that long.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay. So good evening, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, Chairman Clark, and members of the council. Before you is a really early budget forecast for the fiscal year beginning July 1st of 2019 and ending on June 30th of 2020. Before we get into the FY20, this first slide shows you how we are projecting to end the current fiscal year. We balanced the budget using $2 million in fund balance, and our estimated year-end projects to potentially also use the fund balance. And that is mainly driven by the fact that we do not budget for winter storms, and we had Hurricane Michael and Florence and a couple of ice storms, and so with overtime, leaf collection, brush collection, a few pothole repairs, and fuel costs and disposal costs, we are projecting to use fund balance to pay for some of that. The cost of that exceeds over $1 million. Okay. So moving on to fiscal year 2020. On the expenditure side, we're projecting $218.55 million on the expenditure side. And then on the revenue, we're projecting $210.7 million in projected revenue at this time. This is still really early, but giving revenues and expenditures, we're showing a $7.8 million gap at this time. And so I'll explain to you what the orange bar what's in there, and then the blue bar.
Excuse me a second. Are these numbers all enterprise funds? So
this is all general fund. This is a
General
general
fund,
fund
not
report. Yeah. At this point. So on the expenditure side, as you see, these are the major drivers on our increase. The Springstead market study, which goes into effect this April, but the full impact of it starting July 1st full year is $4.3 million, and that includes benefits. Other employee compensation is 2% average merit effective July 1st. An increase in the minimum wage from $12.50 to $12.75. An increase in employee benefits, retirement is $500,000, and increase in employee benefits of 3%, which is $1.2 million. And the $500,000 on employee side is a net cost. The increases were substantial, and we were just notified by the local government employee retirement system on those increases. So total for employee compensation is $4.6 million. Then we have the 2% public safety supplemental pay that will be effective January 1st of 2020, which is $800,000. Information systems. This cost is a combination of several upgrades, some new licenses, some software maintenance that are just kind of standard. It also includes a few new software, like you heard earlier about the neighborly software for community development and their codes enforcement. Fire is going to have a new records management software. So collectively, that along with some cybersecurity, which is extremely needed at this point, is $800,000. For facilities, we have Union Station operating costs. We just heard a little bit about Union Station. Those costs include electric, water, natural gas, just a normal building cost, pest control, things like that. Parkland Pool was not open this past summer. We're projecting that it'll be open this summer, and so we're just adding those costs back. It's $32,000 for staff and supplies. Winston Lake Golf Course, we're adding 6 seasonal staff at 30 to 35 hours a week, and greens maintenance. That totals $203,000. And then Reynolds Park has a new management contract of $84,000. And then vehicular maintenance increase costs, just that sometimes there's a delay in replacing vehicles, and so maintenance costs have increased, and so we are budgeting $235,000 for that anticipated increase. On the revenue side, for property tax, we are estimating a 2.1% growth above the estimated year end, and that'll get us $3.7 million. We'll receive a number from the tax office on March the 1st, and so we'll make some adjustments there. Sales tax growth is about 3% for the point of sale and 4% on growth for per capita. It's $2.2 million. Utility sales tax is expected to increase by $550,000. And user fees, we did not include any anticipated changes. However, in your package, I included a list of user fees that have not been changed in the last 5 years, and with the schedule. And so with the direction of council, the budget office will be glad to review any user fee increases. This is the property tax base slide. that breaks it down by real property, personal property, registered motor vehicles, and public service companies. You can see our growth since 2015. We are projecting about a 2% growth for the end of this fiscal year, 2019. Our tax base is $22.4 billion. That's in the billions. Okay, and then this last slide just shows the preliminary budget review calendar. So we'll have a strategic plan and trial balance budget on April the 15th. During the Public Safety Committee on May 20th, we'll just review the SOAR grantee agency request. On May 23rd, there'll be a presentation of the proposed budget. This will be a budget overview. We'll review the budget document and the capital plan. On May 30th, for the Finance Committee, we'll review community agencies, and then later that evening, we'll have our first public hearing, which usually is community agencies as well. On June the 6th, we'll do a consideration. Finance Committee will consider the budget and a property tax rate. And then on June 17th will be the second public hearing and budget adoption.
How are you dealing with the bond money, bond sales and all that in this budget? Expenditures and revenue? Because I thought we had said we were going to have a tax increase in 2019 for the bonds. Is that
That's
correct?
right. Yes.
But that's not reflected in this yet.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. And Ms. Garrity, go ahead.
Just a couple quick things. As our budget director just pointed out, much of our projection of overspending this year's budget is related to the storms, but not all of it. And we don't want to spend that $2 million. We want to, as close as possible, end the year in the black. The rating agencies don't like to see that for any reason, as well as we want to position ourselves for next year. So we will be announcing tomorrow, I believe, a pretty hard hiring freeze on everything other than public safety and environmental health. We'll also be clamping down on overtime and any other expenditures this year that we can rethink. The most important thing about that is positioning ourselves for next year with the kind of $7.8 million gap going into next year's budget. And you can see it's primarily driven by personnel expenses, some of which we have no control over. So the cost of retirement is given to us by the state. So some of it we don't have a control over, but we'll be looking, it's early, but we'll be looking at, and talking to all of you before we come back with the trial balance budget, we'll be looking at, do we defer or not do merit next year, employee merit, next year's budget, not this year's adjustments, but next year's. Do we eliminate some positions at the mid-level and above? Do we cut the amount we have for IT, for information services? Do we reduce some of the equipment, if not all the equipment, that we plan to purchase next year, as well as what can we borrow or steal from some other funds, other funds as enterprise funds, as was mentioned, I think, by Councilmember McIntosh a while back, to try to close this budget gap. What we don't want to do, I would not recommend, is doing something that makes it more difficult the following year. Whatever we need to do needs to be sustainable and structural.
I do think it's important, let me have a quick comment and then I'll open questions, that the budget include what we're doing with the bonds. Because I'm living with an assumption that there's an automatic 4 cents tax increase July 1st for the bonds. And Ms. Saunders, you may want to actually have a nice graph. You show the money comes in kind of level, and then we spend it kind of up and down and all that. So that would be very helpful. So really, we already got a 4 cent increase, and an $8 million shortfall would take 4 cents. balance, that's 8 cents. And what's our tax rate right now?
Yeah, right.
59.74.
59. Talk about a 15% tax increase.
And I think I have to point out to some of you, when we look at our combined tax rate with the county, when the county raises their rate, which they have to at some point for the courthouse, just their 2.5 to 3 cents for the courthouse, along with our 4 cents for capital, will put us right there at the highest combined rate of the major cities in the state.
I'll just go around. Mr. Larson, you had your hand up.
I was curious in looking at the revenues. I remember last year we were talking about property values and revenues generated from the property taxes, and of course property owners take the brunt of these tax systems that we've imposed on the county or the city. I noticed we got $1 million jump from 17 to 18 as compared to what we're forecasting and what had happened before. What is the accounting? Is that from a reappraisal, or what's going on with those 2 years, going from 16.5 to 17.5?
I think that's $1 billion.
To $1 billion.
Yeah.
In values. Why that jump in revenues, and then we don't see that as an anomaly compared to what you're forecasting previously and what
Are you looking at the tax base chart?
Yeah, I'm looking at the property tax base chart, and we look at between.
Can you go back there? Is that the one? No, keep going.
17 and 18.
There you go.
Are you at this one?
And the total is on 617 is what? 16? 16.
So there was a, yeah.
So in 18 is 17.5. Where everything else, it looks like it's a 0.3, 0.2%, whatever, 2.2, 0.3. We're forecasting 0.2 increase.
We're forecasting a 2%,
yeah.
2.14% for 2019, and that's based on a TR2 that the tax office sends us, and so that's how we were able to update projected year end.
I'm just curious because I mean, obviously, the property tax is a critical issue, and I'm trying to. And when is the next reappraisal going to occur for properties?
No, it wasn't reevaluated.
It's every 4 years. It won't take effect until the 2022 fiscal year. Is that right, Mr. Rao? That's fiscal year.
So what we're going to see. So we'll have a firmer figure on that projected 219, on the 17.7 on property values. When? March, you say?
March 1st, we'll get our first number, and they're typically conservative on the first number. Then we'll have another one in April 1st and then May. But we felt pretty confident to go with the number based on what we are actually projecting to receive this current year. We were a little low. They were conservative on the numbers they gave us this past year, and so we were a little bit more aggressive in the growth in the property tax base. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is a question. I mean, I remember last year we couldn't understand, with all the building and development that's going on in this city, why the rate seemed to be so low. And I'm curious of what we actually, I mean, we relive this, but I was interested in what we forecast for this year compared to what actually came in. We didn't start with 17.5 as our forecast, I don't think. Anyway, this is a moving target right now. And I'm not ready to start a blood drive to pay off this thing. Yeah. We've clearly got a problem.
Might not have a choice.
Okay. I'm just going to go around the table if you don't mind. Oh, excuse me.
I was just going to point out, Councilman Larson, 1% tax base growth is $220 million. So it takes a lot of houses, a lot of apartments. I mean, we're sure that this current year we're going to get that 2.15% because that's what come in from our actual billings, and that's 480 million. But it takes a lot to move that base by 1-2%.
I'm suggesting that we're going to make up the whole amount in that category. I'm just curious as to why we had that discrepancy between those 2 years when it doesn't seem to match the pattern.
I think
well, we had a reval in the 2018. If you're looking at 2018, there was a jump. Yeah. But our average growth has been about 2% each year.
Yeah, because the county will actually publish the new residential revision rates in January of 2020. and that doesn't take place, and then it will affect the budget in 21, 22.
Right.
So that 18 number is actually reflective of the revaluation in 2016.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, I'm just going around the table. Mr. Bessie?
Let me ask again so I can be sure I'm understanding. The increase from actual 2017 to actual 2018 was out of pattern with the years. It was substantially larger than 2 previous years. Can you tell us what factors caused that?
Other than the reval, that would be the driver.
Just the market.
Yep. The market.
Well, it's 4
No.
years. We only do it every 4 years.
Right.
You'd expect it to jump a little bit.
That reflects another couple of years. You'd
Right.
expect the gap to-
It's about an 8% increase, and at 2% a year inflation. And we'll know in this time next year what's happened in the previous 4 years.
All right, so thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to.
Yeah, just, I think the city manager's right on target. We've got to tighten it up right now in order to not overspend, and that's just an unacceptable thing to overspend the budget. 8 cents, I don't think that's a doable tax increase, that we've never done anything like that, and so I appreciate you getting a hold of it very quickly and making that, tighten that up. We're going to have to do some. It's going to be a tough budget. We always say it's going to be a tough budget, but I think we're going to have to do some extraordinary
May have to
things
shoot
this
the
year.
budget director.
Not her fault. We've had great growth. I mean, this year we broke our non-residential construction permits were 10% higher than last year. So we get into good pieces, Mr. Larson. It just takes a while for that to move the numbers.
Mr. McIntosh?
My top 2 surprises were, first of all, just the size of the gaps. And 20 million was a big kind of a shock to me. But the second one was just the low level of growth. 1.8% is very disappointing. And going back to I think it was a January development dashboard they sent around, we had record permits for both residential and commercial. It was $711 million. But of that, we had Bailey, and Bailey we're tiffing quite a bit, right? So we're not getting much there. Salem Town is pay property tax. Novant was $20 million. Wake Forest was $19 million. The Enclave was $9 million. So, $88 million of that 711 was non-revenue generating for us. So, the growth has got to, and we're not going to make it up with growth. $170 million, and I checked with Lee today on this, $170 million of growth adds $1 million to the tax base. So we are not going to do that 7 times next year. We can't make it up through growth, although that needs to be ramped up. It's not going to be done through there. And just when we look at fee structures, we just got to make sure that we are not pricing ourselves out of the game. If we make ourselves not competitive through fee increases, not only do our citizens get upset, but it hurts our business recruitment area. So.
Ms. Adams, comments you might have?
Well, it all goes back to we now have to pay the piper. We didn't give our employees their salaries and wages for decades. And then all of a sudden we did it over the past year or two after we got the disparity study on salaries. And if any of you were here, I tried to help us understand that you can't just go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in salaries either. You got to do it gradually, and we decided we wanted to just get it over with and do it. So now we're caught between somewhat of a rock and a hard place of how do we sustain this without, jeopardizing employees' engagement with us, because we now got a probably $8 million, maybe $9 million gap. The thing about the city's growth, as I said before, if you're not increasing your brand, okay, you got the innovation quarter and you got that going, but your brand to corporate people and businesses is not, again, in our mind, we got a great brand, but the reality of it is we're missing the boat. We're not increasing the life of the people who are the majority in this city, which is the least of us, our poor people, our folks living in poverty, affordable housing, the education gap. not making a livable wage, making $7.25 and 2 jobs, still not going to get it. So you're still looking at the same bucket of people, which is the working poor and the working folk, to try to make up the gap, and that's not changing because it's just not. You got a limited numbers. So, Patrice, the one thing I want to see is, again, how my other cities faring so far, because I met with some black municipal officials Saturday in Greensboro from all over the state, and they were saying the same thing to some degree. So get me the numbers as we normally do on those cities that we benchmark, their growth, their sales tax, and again, their user fees. What do they look like according to us? I would like to see a breakdown or deep dive into the expenditures slide that you gave us.
Okay.
Again, if we got 3,000 plus employees on this increase in compensation, is that everybody? If it's not, give me a number. I also want to know the facilities piece. Do a deep dive into that as well. How many employees? What are these employees going to be doing? And the vehicular maintenance costs. Mr. Garrity knows years ago I started asking for that. We buy vehicles, but how bad are the vehicles? I mean, how can we kind of, I know that's not much money to people, but it is if we can hold back a year on some of this stuff. I just think we're going to have a very challenging year on budget, and no, you cannot increase poor people and working people's property taxes by 8 cents or 9 cents. They're going to come down here with pitchforks and run all of us out here with a guillotine. That's exactly what's going to happen. So I'm just telling you,
Thank you,
Chair, I'm looking for you.
I'm going to do my job. Don't worry.
Put on that hat and use that gavel, man.
Write a check.
Ms. Burke, you're next.
Most of the things have been asked that I had to ask about. I asked Mr. Rao the other day through the city manager about the people on fixed incomes and the kinds of things we're requiring, and I thought at one time we talked about trying to supplement them, and you told me you'd get me a report on that. And also, Mr. City Manager, we talk about this, but how are we making the public aware, and if we have a chance for any input?
Mayor Pro Tem, we thought after this meeting and once we develop that trial balance budget next month, there'd be a time to go out and talk to the community once they can see the different options, and we get some more input from you. But obviously, we're going to need a lot of input from both all the different interest groups, citizens, employees. My guess is a budget like this is the kind of budget where everybody kind of has to share the pain a little bit.
Yes, but I want to say one other thing concerning what Councilwoman Adams brought up about the working poor. And I've said to people when they're disappointed about companies coming to this city, and I think somebody's going to give me that report to show if any of these companies we've had, did they take anybody and put them in the training? Remember that conversation? Yeah. Who was supposed to be giving that to me?
Mr. Raleigh was working on it.
Mr. Riley will be working on it. Now, as I've told the people, I say, yes, I agree with you. We do spend your tax dollars, but I have not seen us take the citizens that we represent, the poor, and let them get some of these jobs. And of course, they say, we see you all talking, coming into our neighborhood and talking about smiling with us. But what are you doing to show proof that this city is genuinely concerned about the working poor and about poor people getting some of the money that their tax dollars are providing for businesses to come in here? And I said, well, what I tell you need to do, you need to make us more accountable. And when people come to your neighborhood and say what they're doing or what they want to do, you just ask them to show me. Show me now. You've been spending the money. Just show me what have you done. And they will be very disappointed because we just spending their tax dollars, but we're not bringing them in. And you didn't mention even downtown. They can't afford to even live in those units. And I'm glad Mr. Montgomery said, let's put on here, if they get money from us, so many of those units would belong. And you know, one thing, I don't go along with that President of the United States of America. I hope you don't knock me off by opening up my mouth, because I've got to be careful. You got the rest of them scared to death up there. But he said one thing that I agree. We need to stop being so polite and courteous in the political world and just tell it like it is.
Tell it like it is.
We are accountable to the taxpayers. Are we really standing up for them, doing what we ought to do? And I'm sure if we would do a little survey, they would say no. So it's up to us to think about them.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Ms. Scipio. Mr. Taylor, we have finished, and as soon as she says a few comments, we'll be adjourning. And you've got one more comment.
Just a couple questions. I just want to make sure my understanding is complete. The Springstead market study full implementation, is that the study where we looked at where we stood versus other cities, and therefore now we're trying to get ourselves in line?
Yeah, that's the consulting firm that did it, Springstead.
But that 4.3 is, that 4.3 million is monies to get us level with others. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was that understanding. I have a couple of things to say. When things go upside down and you've got to look at budgeting, if you're in your family, you have to say, what is it that I like to have but I've got to do without? And I think we're going to have to take that real firm look at the things that we do and what can we do without. But I want to say that when the Depression came and companies were laying off people here in Winston-Salem, R.J. Reynolds told its workforce, we will not eliminate your job, but every household will have a check. It just won't be as much. So they didn't take the tactic of first line, just cut back the number of workers. And I think we have to make sure that we protect the workers here in this city. They do an excellent job. So I would never advocate for eliminating someone's job, because it's a tough decision, but I would hope that we could find other ways to reduce the budget by instead of that. Last month or in January, we talked about the city having over 400 non-performing properties that we own. Somehow we need to be serious about getting that property back on the tax roll. And perhaps we need to be firm about that, take a firm attack of getting those properties back out there. I know it's going to be hard. I think the residents need to know that it's a difficult time for the city. People believe the city has a bottomless pocketbook, that we can fund whatever they want us to do, and that we fund other companies coming in here. I have learned that we don't have all that money. And we do have great needs, but we don't have money to take care of every need. So I know we're going to have to just buckle down, make some hard decisions, but let's put the people first. Whatever we can do to eliminate or reduce our expenditures is what we have to do. And I like the fact that we're going to be doing it sooner. Things that we don't have to agree to, no overtime. Ooh, that'll take out some people. But I think we have to do that.
Ms. McIntosh, I'll give you last word.
Was it 2010, 2011 when there was an efficiency review board or commission?
Yeah.
Might it be time to take a look at that again? And they came up with some good ideas, and I think we followed through with a lot of them, but it might be time to take a look at it again.
We actually, Mr. Rao and senior staff, we pulled out that one as well as the one from 1999. So we're looking at both of them. And
as long as we don't cut bulky item pickup.
That's right.
Leaf collection.
Yeah.
We're not. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, we're finished. It's 5 after 6 and say 10 after.
Yeah, we'll do public safety at 6:10.
The Public Safety Committee will begin. Thank you, everybody, very much.
Public safety will begin at 6:10.